Week 11 of the fantasy football season, and he has quarterback start sits every matchup this week. Thursday Night Football, Cincinnati Bengals at the Baltimore Ravens. So Joe Burrow, we know the last few weeks he's definitely turned things around. The Bengals have turned their season around as well, even though they did lose a tough one last week. Houston Texans, but this week at Baltimore, division game. Always a great game and always a battle. Joe Burrow, I still give him the nod. Ravens, Lamar Jackson, he's a start each and every week. I know some games he's had big games and some games where it's been the defense and the running game doing all the work. But this week, I think Lamar, the ball's going to be in his hands, and it's a big game for both teams because if the Ravens can win this one, this will get them to 8-3 and the Bengals to 5-5. So a big game either way. Lamar Jackson usually comes up pretty good in these situations versus division opponents, and he's a start now to the Steelers at the Browns, staying in the same division. And both teams, I don't like the starting quarterbacks in this one. Kenny Pickett, he really hasn't done much this season to be a guy you have confidence in week in and week out to start in your lineup. And this week he's a sit versus a good Cleveland Brown defense that I think could cause a few turnovers in this game. And obviously with Myles Garrett rushing Kenny Pickett, a few sacks as well. Now to the Browns, Deshaun Watson, we don't know if he's going to play in this game. The shoulder banged up in last week's come from behind victory at the Baltimore Ravens. And even Watson this season, the numbers really haven't been great. We've seen some flashes of the old Watson going back to his Houston Texan days, but not putting up consistent numbers. And injuries have been a concern on and off all season. If PJ Walker steps in for Deshaun Watson, we've seen nothing where he would obviously garner fantasy value. So he's a sit as well. Vegas Raiders at the Miami Dolphins. Aiden O'Connell, he's been all right over the last few weeks here. And the Raiders are 2-0 with Antonio Pierce as the coach now, after they got rid of Josh McDaniel and some guys in the front office as well. But this week here in a matchup with the Dolphins, on paper, it's not the worst matchups in the world, but Aiden O'Connell is not really a quarterback I have confidence in, even though I know he has good weapons. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer making moves, Josh Jacobs. But this week in Miami, he's a sit. Until he's a start pretty much each and every week. I know he's had a couple games where he didn't play that well, is Tua, but this week here, coming off a bye, refreshed a little bit, is this Miami team and a rated defense that really can't stop anyone for the most part, at least a competent offense. He's a start now to the Bears at the Lions division matchup. Justin Fields, if he finally comes back, he's a start for me with his rushing ability. And with him, for the most part, you never know what you're going to get from Fields. He's a tough player to bench. We know this line defense is definitely leaking in the secondary, where we saw last week. This Charger team went up and down the field, even though they were down 24-10 to start. So if Fields is back in this game, which I think they were taking one more week of caution with him to get the 10 days off in between games, like a mini bye, I think he'll come back. He's a start. Tyson Beckett, if Fields is out once again, I don't want any part of Tyson Beckett. He hasn't done much at all this season, and he's been a quarterback that's not making the right reads or the plays. He's a sit. Jared Goff a start. Bears, one of the worst defenses in the league, even though I know Montez Sweat, a great addition at the trade deadline. They signed him up to an extension, but this Lion offense is great. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, two top receiving options, Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery out of the backfield. So this week in a great matchup in Detroit back at home, he's a nice start. Tennessee Titans at the Jaguars. Will Levis is a sit. First week starting for Levis a few weeks ago in Week 8. He had a monster game versus the Falcons, but the last 2 weeks he's failed to find the end zone throwing a touchdown. And this week a tougher matchup with the Jacksonville Jaguars, where their secondary does create a lot of turnovers. I know Levis has the big arm, but he's not behind a great offensive line. And after coming off for 2 weeks in a row, like I mentioned, where he hasn't passed or ran a touchdown, he's a sit. You can't trust him. Trevor Lawrence, borderline option this week. Lawrence, last week it was a tough ball game versus San Francisco 49ers coming to town and steamrolling this Jaguar team. But this week it's a little bit of a better matchup, obviously, versus Tennessee Titans, a team he's familiar with and a team that gives up a lot of passing yards this season. But right now, Trevor Lawrence, it's been a bad season for him. Justin Fields, who's missed 4 games, has more throwing touchdowns with Lawrence. Let that sink in, obviously. But right now, with a few 4 teams on bye and Lawrence with a decent track record versus Tennessee, I'll give him a borderline option this week. Los Angeles Chargers at the Packers, Justin Herbert. We know he's had a couple stinkers here and there this season, but for the most part, he's been a top 7-8 quarterback the whole season, is Herbert. Great weapons, Keenan Allen. Quentin Johnson, I think, as the weeks go on, he's definitely going to get better in this offense here for this Los Angeles Charger team. And also as well, you got Austin Eckler, one of the best receiving backs out of the backfield versus Green Bay defense as middle of the pack. I know it's going to be cold most likely over there in Lambeau, but Herbert, we saw him travel to MetLife Stadium early in the season. I know it wasn't a great game for him, but the Chargers came out and were ready and played well. Now to Jordan Love, he's a sit. Jordan Love has been inconsistent so far in his first season as a starter in the NFL. And this week here, I know this Charger defense gives up a lot of points versus a competent offense, but this offense really hasn't been competent. And Jordan Love, he's taken some big hits, and the offensive line isn't all that great. So this week here versus Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa rushing him, he's a sit. Arizona Cardinals at the Texans. I like both quarterbacks this week. Kyler Murray looked solid last week in his return coming off the ACL injury. And this week, I think he can make some plays at the Houston Texans. Indoor game once again, which obviously is always a plus. And this Texan defense is a young defense. They do make some plays and had a few turnovers, obviously, last week on Joe Burrow, but you still could pass on them. And we know Murray brings a lot running the football as well. DJ Stroud, he's been on a tear, and he's turned this franchise around in just one season here, where he's front runner for Rookie of the Season. He's even in the MVP conversation on the year, CJ Stroud. We're only throwing 2 interceptions. Guys like Nico Collins, Noah Brown, Tank Dell having good years as well. In this week here versus an Arizona secondary that isn't all that great. CJ Stroud's a top 5 option, in my opinion. And obviously you start Dallas Cowboys at the Carolina Panthers. Dak Prescott has started the last 4 games here for Prescott. He's gone off with 25 or more fantasy points. So Dak right now, him and CeeDee Lamb are locked in one of the most dangerous combinations in the league behind Tua and Tyreek Hill over the last month of the season. So Dak, he's got confidence, throwing the football down the field. Brandon Cooks, he got in the mix of things last week. And Jake Ferguson's been solid at the tight end position. So this week here versus Carolina defense, that isn't all that great. Dak once again is a start. Bryce Young's a sit. He's been a bust so far in his first season in the NFL. And obviously it's tough for a rookie quarterback with not a lot of weapons around him. And this week versus one of the better defenses in the league of the Dallas Cowboys, there's no way you're starting him in standard league. So he's an easy sit. New York Giants at the Commanders. Last time these two teams met early in the year, week 7, 14-7. Giants won the game. Tommy DeVito, it looks like he's going to start this one once again. And DeVito last week, I know was some garbage time at the end, but I thought he played better than I thought he would versus a Dallas Cowboy defense, where he hung in there, made some plays. I know it was a total blowout, but at least this kid, he's got some guts, and he got back up after taking a beating in that game, and he can run the football a little bit as well. But this week versus the Commanders in a Titan game where I don't think there'll be much garbage time between these two teams. He's a sit. Sam Howell, he's been a huge surprise this season in fantasy football. Quarterback that drives the football down the field. He's a gunslinger. There's going to be turnovers with it. But like I said, he's got a big arm, and everyone's getting involved. Terry McLaurin, Nami Brown, we even saw find the end zone last week. Jamison Crowder, Jahan Dotson. So this week here versus Giants secondary with injuries and a lot of young players as well. He's a start once again. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the San Francisco 49ers. Baker Mayfield, it's been a great bounce-back season and a one-year prove-it deal with this Tampa Bay Buc team. Him and Mike Evans on the same page. Chris Godwin has had a decent season, but this week a tough matchup versus San Francisco 49er defense in San Francisco. I think they finally straightened things out, and they made a great deal getting Chase Young at the deadline, and a few weeks ago as well, trading for Randy Gregory. So this week, I know Baker's been playing good, 20 or more fantasy points 3 weeks in a row, but at best, he's a borderline option. Brock Purdy has started last week, almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns versus a solid Jacksonville Jaguar defense. And this week here versus Tampa Bay, where we know they've had problems in the secondary all season for the most part, I think Brock Purdy could go out there and have a good ball game. You got all his weapons now. Deebo Samuel back. Brandon Ayuk, a solid year. George Kittle has been putting up huge numbers the last few weeks as well. And you got Christian McCaffrey, one of the best receiving backs, if not the best receiving back in the league. So right now with a good matchup versus a pretty middle-of-the-pack defense, he's a start. Now, Seattle Seahawks at the Rams, Geno Smith to sit. I know last week Geno has a good game last week, but it was versus a weak Washington Commander defense, really with no substance. And this week going on the road in the division rival of Los Angeles Rams. I know their defense isn't all that great, but it's definitely a better defense at this point than the Commanders. So I think Geno Smith, I got to see a little bit more out of him to put him back in the starting lineup, even though I know last season he was top 10 in fantasy points at the position. Matthew Stafford, we don't know if he's going to play in this game. He's a sit for me. He's been too inconsistent this year at the quarterback position. I know you got Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp as your wide receivers. Great 1-2 combo, no doubt about it. But right now, the Seattle secondary has been playing better football over the last few weeks. I know they got some young players, but they got some ball hawks as well that can make plays, and their defensive pass rush is solid as well. So he's a sit. And Carson Wentz, if he steps in this game, we know he's been a turnover machine. We know he hasn't played all season. Carson Wentz lucky to latch on with a team later in the season here in week 11, but he's a sit if he starts not knowing the playbook that well. And like I said, he's a gunslinger where he turns over the football a lot and takes a lot of sacks and big hits. Sunday Night Football, Minnesota Vikings at the Denver Broncos. Joshua Dobbs, he's taken the league by storm this season out of nowhere, starting the year in training camp with the Cleveland Browns, then being a serviceable and a pretty solid quarterback for the Cardinals. And then with Kyler Murray back, they didn't need Joshua Dobbs was this Cardinal team, and they traded him away to the Vikings. But now, since Kirk Cousins has been out and Dobbs has taken over the last 2 weeks, he's found the end zone with 5 touchdowns. We know he's good for 4 or 5 points minimum running the football as Joshua Dobbs. I know this Bronco defense has definitely been a better unit over the last few weeks, but Joshua Dobbs, with his running ability and the fearlessness to go out there and pass the football, make plays with good plays like TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, he's a start. Russell Wilson, a start for me as well. This could be a mini shootout over here on Sunday Night Football in Denver. So Russell Wilson already 18 touchdowns on the season, where all last season he only had 16. So Russ, he's making smarter plays. I know he's checking down the football a little bit too much, but Cortland Sutton's having a great season. Judy, he really hasn't done much, but the running backs have played well. Also Javonte Williams, Julian McLaughlin, Samaje Perine. So this week he had a mini shootout versus a Minnesota defense that's not all that great, in my opinion. I would give Russ the start this week, and then Super Bowl rematch, Monday Night Football. What a game it's going to be. Philadelphia Eagles at the Chiefs. 2 of the top 3 or top 2 quarterbacks in the league going at it. Jalen Hurts, another MVP type season, no doubt about it. Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, making big plays all season. Hurts with his legs, and then that tush push at the 1 yard line, automatic for the touch for the end zone. So I think this will be a shootout, and he's a start. And Patrick Mahomes, obviously a start as well. Another great season here for Patrick Mahomes, and a quarterback you start each and every week. So right now, it wouldn't be surprising if these two teams are into the 30s playing each other, where both defenses have had their moments this year, and both defenses as well have been vulnerable to giving up points this time. So that's quarterback start sits every matchup for week 11 of the fantasy football season.